G'day everyone and welcome to 7 Questions, a podcast that shares the stories and compelling lessons founders, investors and leaders shaping our economy. I'm your host, Wayne Gerard, founder and investor at Partner and co-founder of Create Financial. Through 7 Questions, we explore the founder journey, idea to legacy, uncovering the insights, lessons and defining moments that shaped each founder and the amazing business they built. Whether you're a first-time founder, serial entrepreneur, investor, or someone looking for insights on entrepreneurship and what it takes to build a world-class company, these conversations are designed to inspire you, get you thinking, and hopefully you'll find some timely wisdom that propels your journey.
Welcome to this episode of 7 Questions. Well, I'm in Japan right now, and it's a really appropriate place for me to be, given this episode is on an amazing Queensland company called Squizify. I get to chat with Daniel McDowd, their founder and CEO. I've known Daniel for about 2 years now, and I'm lucky enough to be an investor in Squizify. So this episode talks through Daniel's journey as a founder of a chain of fast food restaurants, a couple of hundred staff, and his business Squizify was born out of the challenges he faced operating his own company. Moving over from being a fast food restaurant or a quick service restaurant founder to a tech founder has been a challenge. And there are lots of amazing lessons and ideas that are relevant to pretty much anyone that's in an executive role, a board role, or an investor role, or you're a first-time founder. So I hope you enjoyed this episode with Daniel from Squizify. It's short and packed full of great insights. Let's get into it.
G'day, Daniel. It is so great to have you on the podcast. Welcome, mate.
Oh, thanks, Wayne. I really appreciate the opportunity, mate. Looking forward to having a bit of a conversation.
Guys, I was lucky enough to invest in Squizify about 9 months ago, and I've got to know Daniel over the last couple of years. Squizify is a digital food safety platform that is literally taking the world by storm. And Daniel, to kick off, let's help people get to know you. So let's start by a bit of a story. Who are you? What are the experiences and moments that shaped your founder journey?
Yeah, well, look, don't hold it against me, guys, but I actually am from New Zealand originally. I've been over here about 20 years now, so I'm sure well and truly settled in. But my background's working within the hospitality space. Sort of back at university, I did the McDonald's thing for a while and I really enjoyed that. And then when I came to Australia, I sort of gravitated towards the sales environment. So worked selling photocopiers for a company called Xerox for a number of years before sort of falling back into the hospitality game. And I was a franchisee for a large QSR brand, a quick service restaurant brand here in Australia. Did that for about 14 years and loved it, really enjoyed it. Love the space. And then from that is kind of where Squizify was sort of born, through the sort of frustrations and challenges that I had within that environment. So all paths lead to where we are today, but yeah, really, really enjoyed the journey so far.
Awesome. So Daniel, we ask 7 questions of our guests, and those 7 questions are really designed to help people get to know you, get to understand a bit about your company and get a sense of how you're wired and what you do and what's important to you. So we'll kick off with question number 1, which is really about the catalyst for starting Squizify. So what inspired you to start the company? And if you were to think about it, what is the kind of problem you're trying to solve?
Yeah, look, I mean, it's a little bit of a cliche here, but Squizify was born out of my own personal frustrations around running my own restaurants. As I mentioned before, like I had a number of stores and a QSR brand here in Australia, and I think close to 400 staff all up. And when it came down to managing food safety, it was a very paper-based process. In fact, we had like an old school phone book full of daily food safety tasks that we had to sort of go through. And for the most part, it does the job. But when it comes down to the accuracy, get it done on time, and being alerted to when things aren't right, paper's just fraught with so many challenges there. And so Squizify was very much born through that process of how do we have a system that can not only digitize what we do, but really help staff sort of manage that day to day and get through the the ups and downs when it comes down to managing food safety. And it's a very fluid sort of thing, food safety. It can change very, very quickly. And so having the right staff focused on the right things is a constant battle for not just restaurant owners, but any sort of food service providers, not just here in Australia, but globally. And so we identified that early on and thought that, if there was a system there that we could come in and we could capture those key fundamental food safety elements that we need to get, but then also use that data to go back to the end users, which in my case was myself, showing me what are the strengths, what are the weaknesses, what are the risks, and give us a chance to really focus on improving those areas. It could only work well for not only my businesses, but for the brand that I was working with as well. And so Squizify sort of started small and then it sort of grew and we added different features and functions as we sort of evolved the platform over the years. But it was very much started in those challenging moments when you're under fire and things are busy and you're trying to maintain staff training and getting them up to speed with what things should be doing. We needed a system that was just a better solution than we had at the time.
It sounds like food safety and the management of the compliance around it is quite a tedious issue. What's the cost of getting it wrong?
Look, it's a fundamental thing to get right within any sort of food service provider. You imagine if you go to a restaurant and you have fantastic service, but the food was only average, you'd probably go back because it was a good experience through the service that you got. If you flipped it and said, look, the food was amazing, but the service was sort of hum-hum, you'd probably still go back because you had great food. But if you went to a restaurant and had great food and great service, but you and your family, your friends, or whoever was with you got horribly sick through food poisoning, you're probably going to blacklist that restaurant for life. And so food safety is it's the thing that everyone just assumes is right. But when you get it wrong, it can go horribly wrong. And so often we position ourselves as not just a food safety solution for operators, but we're kind of this risk mitigation tool where we're allowing them to see issues and problems kind of before they become massive concerns for the business. And so, there's numerous examples littered through history really on businesses that have got it wrong and have ended up on the front page of the news or social media. And customers will vote with their feet and they'll just not attend, not go to your place or your brand. And so getting it right is really critical. And we can sort of list a number of brands. And to be fair, some big international brands that have got it wrong and it's cost them tens of millions of dollars of damages to try and right the wrong, so to speak. So I think when you looked at the importance of food safety and getting it right on the scale of, what should I be focusing on in my food service venue, food safety would be right at the top of the pile.
Got it. And you're selling into food venues. Are you also selling into other places that need to think about food safety?
Yeah, well, that's the fantastic thing about food safety is the fact that it's very universal and it's across a multitude of industries. And so, yes, we started off with Squizify into the sort of QSR and the restaurant and cafe kind of space. But then we quickly evolved into the convenience store space and the childcare and aged care space. We do a number of hotels and hospitals. So the fundamentals around how food safety operates really makes no difference if you're in a kitchen in a hotel or in a kitchen in a high-end restaurant. You've still got to do the basics really, really well. And it's also not bound by geographical restraints, which means that if you put a bit of chicken on a bench here in Australia and left it out, now under the same conditions, bacteria is going to grow identically to the same bit of chicken that would be over in the UK or the US or Mexico or something like that. So we're really tapping into those sort of universal fundamentals of physics around food safety and really tackling that head on.
That's really cool. Right, let's move on to question number 2. What unique insight or secret sauce, pardon the pun, or different approach? So what is it doing that is setting you guys apart and helping you win competitively?
Yeah, look, for us, right from the day one, when we had this idea around Squizify was that let's just be a food safety solution. And so when we start looking at different players in the market, what they tend to do is they go an inch deep, but a mile wide within what their product offering is. So they'll come in and they might offer a little bit of food safety here and a checklist there and some training there and extra rostering and other bits and pieces. And it becomes this kind of large platform that does lots of different things, but doesn't really do one thing that well. And so what we've really focused on is staying very niche within the food safety space. So using that analogy before, we're an inch wide, but a mile deep, just in food safety. And look, it's easier said than done. As a business owner and as an entrepreneur, you always want to get out there and sort of chase that shining ball. What's that new thing we're going to bring to the market? But what we've done very well over the last few years is we've stayed true to that ethos of staying in our lane, staying true to food safety. And that does, Wayne, is it gives us the ability to go into some of these really large tier one accounts that all they need is food safety. They're not really that interested in trying to swap out their POS system or their rostering system or their inventory management system or whatever it might be. They just want a solution that fixes their food safety problem. And so we go in there as that one-stop shop for food safety, but the ability at the back end to then tap into those other platforms. So therefore our customers don't have that kind of app fatigue syndrome where they've got an app for everything. And so we talk to a lot of existing platforms, and it just makes our customers' experience just that much more easier and seamless. And so far, I'm finding that that's working really well for us.
So is Squizify a software product, a hardware product, or both? Like, what does it look like? Give me an example of a customer, how you would deploy your solution and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so look, we've got a bit of a three-pronged approach with this one. So at the heart of everything we do, we are a software SaaS provider. So we go into businesses and provide a software solution that captures all their food safety requirements. In parallel to that, we offer a HaaS environment, so a hardware as a service, which means that we can go in and provide temperature sensors, gateways, Bluetooth probes, and all that sort of stuff that integrates into our system. So that way it makes our user experience just that much more seamless because you're not having to manually go in and do things. And those two elements alone build a somewhat of a moat around our business and has been a very strong moat for the last few years. But as we move into this new era of AI, those two things alone, aren't always the what you should hold your head on. And so what we've now done is we've added this AI layer onto our platform. So we're very much now a data company. So we use all the food safety data from our software, all the food safety data from our sensors and our IoT devices, and we then use that as a data play to then go back to our customers with rich insights as to how their operations are going, not only at a store level, but at a brand level and at a country level as well. And so therefore they can really drill into the areas of risk or concern and close to real time, so they can then deploy their own assets to fix these problems or fix these issues or improve operational efficiencies through the data play. And so as we move sort of into the future, that data play is going to become even more important for us as we sort of stabilize and protect the business and build the business and launch into new markets as well. So it's really exciting, but it's also a big problem to tackle.
Mate, it's a fast-moving environment. Question number 3 is all about the challenges, right? So what's one of the hardest things you've had to overcome as a founder? What's one of the biggest challenges that you've had to work through? And how did you do that? And what did you learn from it?
That was a great question. I mean, look, there's probably 3 parts to that. The first one comes down to the product itself. I think entrepreneurs sometimes get a little bit complacent and they drink their own Kool-Aid to a degree, and they try and fit their products to fit the market. And we really need the market to tell us, what the product needs to evolve, needs to be. So that product market fit piece is really important. And we've even found that the product market fit evolves over time. And what was the product market fit 3 or 4 years ago is starting to evolve and change as we move forward. So that constant sort of keep your eye on the prize kind of piece when it comes down to product market fit is a really, really key one. The second one's around our team. Just got to surround yourself with just A-grade players. I've got a mentor, Anna Samios, that talks about this a lot. And, there's no point trying to push C players into A players. Hire for A players right from the word go. And look, that might cost a little bit more, but you'll find that if you attract a few good A players in the team early on, they will then attract more quality A players into the team as they move forward. Not many people want to come in and work for C players. And so being really brutal in your own assessment and how you hire people, not just because it's the fit right now, but is it the fit going to be moving forward? And really stress test it. Is this person not only going to be a good culture fit, but are they able to make the right decisions in the right moments? Can they make the tough calls when they need to make the tough calls? And I think there's a bit of a romantic notion sometimes, particularly in startup space, that everyone has to be one big happy family. And it's like Google when you've got slides and all this candy is at your office and all this sort of stuff. And there's parts of that I think is really valuable, but there's also parts that I think, we've got to make sure that we're a productive, efficient team that executes on a daily basis. And that can come with great culture. It's finding that balance of those right people early on. And then probably the third one, Wayne, is around your own self development, improvement.
Yep.
I, as I said before, I came from restaurants. So I used to run restaurants, and most of my staff were under 18 years of age. And how you manage those people and those employees were very different to how you manage corporate adults, so to speak, in a startup space. So you as a person really have to sort of understand what your strengths and weaknesses are. I'm actually a big advocate of enhancing your strengths and playing to your strengths. The weaknesses are there, but you can hire to support your weaknesses. You can hire people around you to kind of bump you up where you're not strong. And I see often the times that people focus on their weaknesses trying to make them strength. But I don't know. Personally, I found that it's a better way to go and just double down on your strengths and really what works well, just keep pushing that really well. And you as a person are constantly evolving.
As we evolve, Daniel, we often get the chance to stop and sit down and go, and this is question number 4, with all that I've learned right now, what do I wish I knew when I started Squizify? So have you got any, things that when you think back and go, gosh, if I knew this back then, it would have made a huge difference to where we are now or something like that?
It's probably it's a dangerous question in some regards, because if I knew what I knew now before I started, I'm not sure I would have started. It is a hard graft.
Yeah.
And look, I think the key overall is that as an entrepreneur, you kind of have to have this really high degree of naivety before you get into things. Look, I'd like to think that I'm a pretty good decision maker, but there are only certain decisions. There's a limit to how many decisions I can make. And so therefore, really big focusing on the priorities. What are the biggest fires that are burning? And I need to tackle those first. So I think in the early days, I got a bit distracted with some of the fancy stuff, your marketing, the websites, and all that sort of bits and pieces, and not focusing enough on the team and the core and those fundamental things that are the harder challenges to tackle. And they're not as fun to tackle, but they certainly need to be dealt with. Otherwise, those small little bushfires can become raging infernos if you don't deal with them. So that's certainly something I wish I pushed myself early on a bit harder on around the right people piece. But overall, I think there's also an element of, there's lots of mistakes that we made, and we were a little bit hamstrung when we first started, because we launched our business way in 3 months before COVID hit, right? So we had all these grand plans and what we're going to do, and I think Mike Tyson said it best once, where he goes, everyone goes to a fight with a great plan until you get punched in the face.
Yeah,
and I think that's what COVID did to us, is it kind of just completely derailed any sort of momentum or plans of the future and all other bits and pieces. And so, yeah, it's an interesting one, but I think the idea would be, just get in there and give it a crack. And a little bit of naivety doesn't hurt from time to time.
Mate, a little bit of naivety is powerful, because it gives you the confidence to take the step forward. That analogy of a car driving at night, you can see as far as your headlights, where the road's going, but you can't necessarily see everything that's coming. And I think if if you have walked the road before, you certainly understand more of what's coming, and that can be a blessing and a curse, right?
Yes, yeah, very much so.
Yeah. Let's shift to question number 5, and it's all about pivotal moments. And has there been anything really material that's changed the trajectory or the direction of the business?
Probably 2 that really stand out to me. The first one was around our first really large enterprise account. So we managed to get arguably the world's largest convenience store as a customer, and got all their sites on in Australia. And what that enabled us to do was give us true momentum and wind in our sales. Now, we knew the product was great. We had a great team. We knew the problem we were solving was a really tough problem to solve, and it was an important problem to solve. And when COVID kind of happened, it put a lot of those big opportunities on ice to start with. And then when this opportunity came, COVID finished, we jumped in and really sort of hit the ground running and brought on this large brand. This large brand then brought on another one and then another one. And it was just like a momentum push in the business. And it gave not only the team a real big shot on the arm to say, hey, we're actually, got a real good shot at here at making this business a raging success. It was a case of that, there's validation there, a baby that we've created, we put into the world, and it's starting to grow and prosper. And the feedback we got from the customer at the time was absolutely fantastic. They weren't just a customer; they were a raging fan of what we're doing, and they're still a customer today. And that really gives us momentum into those new markets and going overseas. And then the second one was probably around our Series A. So we raised the Series A back in February of this year, February 2025, and that was a really interesting experience to go through. We were just coming off the highs of 2021 and 22, where money was just everywhere, into it was really tough to raise. And so, as you know, you're involved in that process as well. And the key elements we found is that, regardless of all the external noise that was going on in the market and all the buzz around, VCs are pulling back and doing this, we had a good product, we had a good team, and we had good traction. And those three things alone, pretty much everything just got pushed aside. And we had just a huge amount of interest coming into the business, to the point where we were, over doubly subscribed to what we were after. And the partner we chose in the end, we thought was a fantastic option for us. Gave us really international experience, exposure, and they've been, fantastic with us ever since. What we've really enjoyed about it is that they've come into the business wanting to help, not necessarily hinder the growth. And so those are probably the two main things, mate. But the momentum in the big enterprise sales, and then raising the Series A.
Mate, it's been a hectic journey for you guys. You launched just before COVID. You made it through COVID. You then won a really large convenience store client, which propelled the business to the next level. You've raised a successful Series A and are scaling globally. What about you, the founder, the husband, the father, how do you sustain your energy, mindset, and your relationships, both, at home and with your team, customers and investors, while you're building a company like this that's growing so quickly?
Yeah, I think it's probably one of the biggest, if not the biggest challenge most entrepreneurs would face. That is this old adage of work-life balance. Look, I should just describe and say there is no such thing. It really is about making sure that you've got, I talked before about the A-grade players in my team. I've got my A-grade players at home as well. And they say one of the best decisions you make in life is who you marry. And I was very fortunate on that side of things. And so she's very aligned to what mission I'm on as an entrepreneur. For instance, the last 30 days, I've been home 4 days out of the last 30. And so
wow.
I've got three young kids. The pressure's on at times. And so having that rock and that stability at home just makes I couldn't do without it, basically. And so I think that whole idea of making sure your home life is kind of in check, is stable, is really key before you sort of go off trying to change the world as a business owner. Yeah, the other part is around, we touched on before about the growth, and as a first time sort of CEO, founder of a startup, you've got to go in there knowing that you don't know everything and that you're prepared to be coached. And I have a number of mentors that I work with that challenge me, and I need that. I think I thrive on that as well. And so as you evolve as a person, as an entrepreneur, you've got to evolve as the business. And I've seen quite a few times now that CEOs that start a business have a great idea, but they themselves aren't necessarily the great CEO of that idea or that business that they're going to build. And so identifying that early on, I think is really important. And then once again, surround yourself with the right people that can sort of put you into your right position, but also give the business every sort of chance of success. So that's probably the key ones, mate, is the home life and the people thing. The other sort of final point I'll just raise on that one is around the ability to be coachable. We're seeing the market change massively at the moment, particularly with AI and what it's doing. If we go in there with a fixed mindset, not just myself, but my team, my key sort of executives, if we go in there thinking this is our product and we're just going to stay and not change, there's an element of danger there, quite a large element. And so we often talk in our meetings around being adaptive, being aware of our surroundings. We know what our competition does, but we don't get too fascinated about it. We're not too fixated on what they're doing. They're there, they're doing what they're doing, but we're obviously focused on what we're trying to do as well. So I think that element is quite important too. But overall, mate, there's lots of balls sort of floating around and juggling at the time. But I think as an entrepreneur, it's just such a key part to make sure that we are focused on the key priorities in the business. We've got an opportunity, particularly Squizify from a growth perspective, that we're just taking off. So the team's got to be really focused on what the dream is, what the vision is, and the mission and purpose.
Perfect segue into question number 7, Daniel. You're just taking off. So what's next for Squizify, and how can people support your journey?
Yeah, well, look, it's sky's the limit a little bit of what we're doing. We've got some really exciting sort of AI plays that are coming in, and AI plays that will generally move the needle for what our customers can do with food safety. The data that we can collect, the operational improvements, the ability for staff to act in the moment. That's all starting to come into our platform at the moment. And so using that rock solid sort of foundation that we've built around food safety, our big focus now is that international growth. So we now have offices in Australia, we've got Thailand, we've launched in Japan recently. We're about to move into the UK and the US by the end of the next year. So we've got some really sort of aggressive growth plans. But it's also a case of making sure that each market we go into, we establish that product market fit again, make sure that we are servicing our customers in the best possible way we can, get those really strong green shoots that come into that market. And then from that, we then catapult into the new markets therefore after. And so we see a really bright future with what we're doing as a business. Food safety is not going to go away. And if anything, it's probably going to become even more of a focus point for businesses to ensure that they're doing the right thing. Food safety should be part of the decision-making process when people choose to go to restaurants or choose to go to hotels. And so we're really championing that cause to give the good operators that are doing a fantastic job around food safety, just giving them a chance to put their hand up and say, hey, look, choose us because of not only the fantastic food and the service and all the other things they do, but it's because of our food safety as well. And we really believe in that, and we're doubling down on that, and we see a really strong future with the consumers being able to make better informed decisions.
Mate, sounds like 2026 is going to be a really exciting year for Squizify as you continue to scale globally, and a big year for you as a founder and CEO. So let's finish on 7 rapid fire questions. First thing that pops to your mind, Daniel, what do you prefer, coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Mornings or nights?
I'm a mornings person.
Beach or mountains?
Beach. Every day of the week.
Books or podcasts?
Podcasts. I'm actually quite dyslexic, so I can't read books. So podcast is my own form of education.
I love it. Risk or routine?
Risk.
Gym or cardio?
At the moment, it's probably neither, but I need to get into one of them. I'll probably go gym.
Love it. I'll come with you, don't worry. And number 7, legacy or lifestyle?
Legacy.
I love it. Daniel, thanks so much for joining us on 7 Questions. Been a great opportunity to learn a little bit more about you as a founder and the journey you're going on, and also Squizify. What an exciting business in food safety, something that you founded here in Queensland that's scaling globally. Mate, thanks for sharing your story.
Oh, look, great. Thanks for the opportunity, Wayne. It's always good to have a chat.
Awesome. Thanks for listening to this episode of 7 Questions. If you'd like to learn more about the founders, you can get a link to the full show notes in the description below. Have a great day. We look forward to you joining us on the next episode.